It's a very good evening to everyone, and welcome to this lecture in our society lecture series from Martin Wells, who I'll introduce in a moment. But I see a lot of new faces tonight, which is great, or a few new faces anyway, so I'll say a few words about our organization. The Archaeological Institute of America was founded in 1879 and shortly thereafter was chartered by an act of Congress and is the largest, the oldest and the largest society for the promotion of archaeology. And in particular, the AIA as a professional organization is unique for its activities in local communities, for having local chapters, and also for being the only organization which is committed to the study of archaeology in all regions and periods, and to help keep that in perspective, and particularly the Old World. Our local chapter is one of the larger chapters in the country, and it's led by the officers you've seen on the screen, including myself. I think I didn't say that. I'm Martin Gallagher, the president of the Dallas-Fort Worth Society of the Archaeological Institute of America, and many of the other officers and executive committee members are here. We'd love to hear from you if you have input on what you'd like to see from the local chapter. We're here to serve you, and also anyone who would like to get involved. We have a number of initiatives that we're starting to roll out, so be in touch with me or any of the other officers. I think my email is on one of these screens. And we'd like to encourage all of you to consider, who haven't yet, to consider joining the Archaeological Institute of America and enjoy some of the benefits that come from that. There are discounted memberships for students, and particularly particular advantages for students. I'd like to underscore in particular the Waldbaum scholarships. The AIA gave out, I think, 15 of these scholarships to people all across the country, and the only qualification is that your first time going on an excavation. And you do get a discounted membership, which memberships for everyone. And I want to underscore that in particular, that the AIA has a particular identity of being a place for professional archaeologists, but also for students and interested members of the public. And your membership helps support fellowships and grants that fund excavations, research, publication, and also the preservation of archaeological sites, which is a very big problem. With your AIA membership, and this is basically the cost of a student membership, I think is worth this, you get a subscription to Archaeology magazine, and this is a really great publication which keeps you up to date in an in-depth but accessible way by archaeologists who are actually involved in the field. And you also get a discount if you're interested on the American Journal of Archaeology, which is really the premier publication for scholarship in Mediterranean archaeology. There are also opportunities to travel as a student on an excavation. I encourage you to look at fieldwork opportunities, and for members of the general public, we also have tours of spectacular ancient sites. And this year we have a new excavation in the Dallas area that many of you have heard about, the San Giuliano Archaeological Project, where we're studying a site which has over 1,000 rock-cut tombs. It seems to be one of the most important sites for the Iron Age Etruscan transition. And now we have the Iron Age so-called Villanovan Etruscan transition. And now we have an unlooted tomb dating to that period. And we're also studying the roads and trade networks in the area and a medieval gate complex jointly sponsored by Baylor University and the University of North Texas, which has filled up for this year, but we'll be at it for 2 further seasons, and who knows, someone might cancel. So in any case, those are some of the people working on that project. We're taking a bit of a break after spring break. But I want to remind you, we tried to send out a doodle a few weeks ago to see if anyone was interested in going to an Iliad. And we're going to try again if anyone is interested in the finale on the 3rd of March. Myself and some colleagues from the University of Texas at Arlington will be there. So I'll send out another electronic message. We'll see if we get enough people, or else everyone can buy their own tickets. We'd also like to invite you now to, we're on Twitter and developing a web page and on Instagram as well. So follow us on Twitter at DFW Archaeological. I think that's also our Instagram handle, isn't it? Yes. So be looking for us more in addition to our Facebook page, which many of you subscribe to. And if anyone is interested in being added to our mailing list, be sure to get in touch with me as well. I'd like to invite everyone to join us for dinner and further conversation and the best margaritas in Dallas, as well as cheap tacos on Thursday night at Desperados, 4818 Greenville Avenue. You can see the map. It's very easy to get to from here, and we hope to see all of you there. And with that, it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Martin Wells from Austin College. Dr. Wells did his PhD at the University of Minnesota and has also been involved in some of the most well-known excavations, particularly for the Hellenistic period, the most important historical period, as you all know. But been involved at ancient Sicyon, which is in the northern part of the Peloponnese, near Corinth, but a great Hellenistic center, as well as in Gordion, as you'll hear more about tonight, and in Israel. And so I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Wells to tell us about how cosmopolitan Gordion was. Martin, you're very welcome. Sorry, I used to be better at this. There we are. Yeah.
You can just go skip to the margaritas. That would be great. It's be much more in fluid conversation. Turn this on. Is that on the audio? Lectern mic? I can talk really loudly. That's good? There's nothing, there's like a little graph on here, but nothing's happening. So maybe I stand right here. Everybody's in the back? Good? Okay. Okay. Thank you to Professor Gallagher and the Dallas-Fort Worth Society of the Archaeological Institute of America. We had a really nice conversation earlier today, and Professor Dowling. It was great to chat with you, and it's great to be here. I'm very happy to be here with you tonight and to meet with you all and talk with you all about Hellenistic Gordion, a site that is close to my heart and something I have been dealing with and thinking about for over 15 years. I want to say thank you and welcome to the faculty, students, and staff of SMU and UNT and Austin College. It's great to have everybody all here, and exactly, I guess, what we were talking about, bringing the North Dallas students together to meet and talk about archaeology. It's great. And a final welcome and thank you to the members of the public for your interest and your support of the AIA. And I'll repeat some of what Martin said about the AIA. And the mission of the AIA is, as we heard, is to support archaeological research and the dissemination of archaeological knowledge through the conferences and the publications and the public lectures and the promotion of local chapters like this. So I encourage you all to keep up your memberships in the AIA, renew, or sign up today. Do it. So that the work of excavating and protecting the past can continue and educating the present about it. All right, all of that can continue. Okay, so I am going to do this two ways tonight. I'm going to start off reading, and then I'm going to switch to just talking, because I don't like to do this I don't think I do it very well, but there's some information I want to make sure that you get, and then we'll just talk. All right, as I said, I'm very happy to be here with you all to talk about Hellenistic Gordion. Gordion is not a site that many undergraduates studying Old World archaeology learn about. I would guess that the number is to be equally small among the general public, even among the more enthusiastic fans. As Brian Rose, the immediate past president of the AIA and the current director of the Gordion Excavation Project, explains, Gordion lies, this is quote, Gordion lies too far to the west for many Near Eastern archaeologists and too far to the east for those in the classical world. Right? We're right here, so it's unfortunate. Here Rose is discussing Iron Age Gordion or Phrygian Gordion. Gordion of the 9th, 8th, and 7th centuries BCE. The Gordion that was the capital of the Phrygian Empire and the home of King Midas. But if even an imperial capital and a major player in the Iron Age politics of the Near East often gets ignored, how can we expect the little village that it became, far from any major capitals in the wake of Alexander the Great's conquest of Asia, how can we expect that little village to catch anyone's attention? In my lecture tonight, I hope to fix this situation for Hellenistic Gordion. Phrygian Gordion's reputation is fine, as recent volumes on its archaeology and chronology have reaffirmed its place as the touchstone for architecture and material culture in the first half of the first millennium BCE in Anatolia, or modern-day Turkey. But Hellenistic Gordion, or Gordion from the time of Alexander's visit in 333 to the sack of the site by the Roman legions in 189 BCE, has not received the attention those earlier levels did. Tonight, I will walk us through that settlement, and we will learn about the people who live there in a geographic and political no man's land, but culturally in the very heart of the world that Alexander created. To get to that small village, there are some preliminary steps we need to take. First, I'll present a very brief history of the site in order to explain why any archaeologist went there in the first place. Then I'll tell the story of those excavations in order to explain why I am here today. Then I'll explain how I reconstructed the settlement from the results of those early excavations, and finally, we'll go to the settlement. We'll visit the houses and look in the storerooms. will see the games of the people who live there and consider their gods. These people, like all people, had a story, and it's through the stuff they left behind that we will begin to hear about it. So, Gordion is located in the heart of ancient Anatolia, or modern-day Turkey, and today it's about a 90-minute drive from its capital of Ankara. The Roman historian Livy speaks of Gordion as being equidistant from the three seas, and, well, sort of more or less, he's sort of right. The site lies squarely in the larger geological formation of the Phrygian Plateau, and more specifically, in the plain of the Sakarya River. The Sakarya River meanders just past over here. This is looking at the modern village of Yasahuyuk. We're going to be spending most of our time over here on the Citadel Mound. But keep in mind these peaks that dot the ridges. Those are the tumuli, the burial mounds of the, say, Phrygian nobles that ruled in the Iron Age. Yeah, but this is the plain. From this overhead photograph, we can see the major components of the site. The Citadel Mound here, right? And here are those tumuli I was mentioning, all the dots around here, both on the east side and a few on the west. The largest of these tumuli is Tumulus MM, located here, or the so-called Midas Mound. It rises 53 meters off the plateau, the plain, the level of the plain. So here's a close-up overhead shot taken sometime in the 60s of the Citadel Mound. That's where we'll be spending our time tonight. And then here's a view of that, the Tumulus Mound, the so-called Midas Mound. Though there is evidence of occupation at the site dating back to the 2nd millennium BCE, things don't really start to get going at Gordion until the late 10th or early 9th century. That's when the monumental construction projects began on the Citadel Mound. Extensive fortifications and a massive gate complex leading to, there's the gate complex, fortifications, leading to an administrative or aristocratic or royal sector characterized by an outer and inner court, gate through here, outer court, inner court, and multiple huge buildings and what the excavators refer to as megara. Those of you who have taken your Bronze Age Greece courses will recognize megara there as sort of long rectangular buildings, the antechamber, and then a main chamber. West of this royal sector is the so-called terrace buildings, or the industrial sector, a second area of activity with two rows of almost equally large buildings on both sides. So a row of buildings here, and a row of buildings, presumably, that continue the whole way. This is over 100 meters long. At the time it was built, it was the largest building in Asia. Weaving tools and grain grinding equipment found in these buildings, these terrace buildings, show that they were the sites of textile and food production on a massive scale. Hundreds of workers in there. Toward the end of the 9th century, the powers, those are the terrace buildings as they are today. All right. Towards the end of the 9th century, the powers that be at Gordion began a huge remodeling project on the citadel, basically to raise the level. The plan was to raise it about 4 or 5 meters. During that construction, a fire broke out and burned the whole site. The construction plan, and amazingly, nobody died. There were no skeletons in that destruction level at all. Amazing. The construction plan was not abandoned, however, and soon the new citadel was complete, built almost on the exact same plan as the previous citadel. Right? Nothing looks like it's changed very much. Okay? Still have a massive gate. The orientation shifted a little bit. Still leads into an outer court, still with large monumental buildings, leading into an inner court with more monumental buildings. Still take this to be the royal sector, since it seems to be following the same plan, as well as the new industrial sector. They seem to, however, in this period, learn their lesson about buildings that sharing party walls, and these are now freestanding buildings in case another fire breaks out. Keep the damage minimal. Okay. This was the Gordion of Gordias, he of the Gordian knot, and the Gordion of Midas, his son, the mythological king with the golden touch, and the actual historical king who navigated the unsteady political waters of the 8th century and was sometime ally of the mighty Neo-Assyrian Empire. Evidence points to a significant growth in the population during this period, as we now see substantial buildings in the lower town and a fortification wall enclosing that area. So here's our citadel mound, and then magnetometry and resistivity surveys have given us the circuit wall of the fortifications, 2 significant kind of fortresses here and on the southern side and the northern side, and then excavations have revealed houses and other buildings in this lower town. Probably all the people needed to raise the level of the citadel. In the 7th century, Phrygian power and influence waned as that of Lydia, the new kingdom to the west with its capital at Sardis, grew. Gordion fell under Lydian control sometime in the early 6th century and served as a military outpost and home to a Lydian garrison. The Lydians were right to worry, as their king Croesus was defeated in 546 by Cyrus the Great, first king of the new dominant empire from the east, the Achaemenid Persians. Under Achaemenid rule, Gordion became a minor administrative center, with a few new constructions, but still keeping the same plan. Right? This sort of reuse of this plan and these monumental buildings. We get a few new constructions, but not much. Around 400, perhaps as a result of an earthquake, many of the buildings on the citadel collapsed and they were never rebuilt. The infrastructure or the interest just wasn't there. But still, activity continued with bronze and iron working establishments, an alabaster workshop, and the inhabitants even increased the amount of pottery they were importing from mainland Greece. So the activity is still strong. Right? It's just the architecture is not what it used to be. That was the Gordion that Alexander saw when he arrived at the site in the winter of 334. The historian Arrian says that Alexander knew of the legend of the Gordian knot, that whoever could undo the knot would be the king of Asia. And so, as Arrian explains, Alexander went to where the knot was kept. We have an idea that it was probably in a refurbished room in this building down here, the Mosaic building. And so, as Arrian explains, Alexander went to where the knot was kept, and after some difficulty with it, cut it with his sword, and did indeed go on to conquer all of Asia. After the knot, Gordion was never the same, as we'll see. Okay, this is where the lesson in ancient history stops for a while, and the story of early modern archaeology begins. Gordion up there. He wintered there for 334-3, and then continued on his way. All right. In the early 20th century, in 1900, the railroad from Baghdad to Ephesus was being put in through this part of what is modern-day Turkey. And part of that construction cut through and disturbed some of this mound. Some German archaeologists, some brothers, the Courts of Brothers, heard about this, went down there, did a few small-scale excavations, one here and one here, and found walls, floors, pottery, monumental construction, and became convinced that what they had was the site of Gordion. Right? From our historical accounts and the modern geography and topography, it seemed to match up. Okay. Fine, great. They published some of their excavations in 1904, yet nothing happened for almost 50 years. Right? It isn't until 1950 that Rodney Young and the University of Pennsylvania returned to Gordion. They had been looking for a site. They wanted Sardis. Harvard took it. They looked in North Africa, maybe Cyrene, but then Gordion caught Young's eye, and it worked out. So, from 1950 to 1973, over those 23 years, Penn and the archaeologists from Penn spent 17 seasons there excavating. Okay? This is Rodney. I believe this picture was taken when he was still working in the Agora in Athens, and then some of those early excavations. Okay. This picture was taken in 1951, I believe. I love the archives. If you ever get a chance to go to an archaeological excavation archives, do it. It's amazing. Amazing. You just get lost. All right. At the end of that first season, this is what the site looked like. This is what the Citadel Mound looked like. First, just to orient us, this was one of the Courts of Brothers trenches, and here was another one. That first season, in 1950, Young and his team opened up 4 trenches. At the end of that first season, these 2 had come down to Roman levels, and they stopped. Okay? These 2 had come down to Hellenistic levels. There was no Roman occupation above it. Okay? Hellenistic levels. So post-Alexander. Over the next 23 years and 17 seasons, Young and his team continued to go down and out, opening up more and more trenches and to dig everything deeper. Young was after Gordion of Midas. This was the era. They knew what they were doing and they did it very well. But it was an era where the responsibilities were not so demanding on publishing what you found or even being responsible for what you excavated. And so the upper levels weren't so interesting to Young. They wanted Gordion of Midas. They wanted the big stuff. Midas had this reputation, right? He was gold, right? So in some ways it's understandable. But after those 23 seasons, Young died in 74, so that's why we stopped. That's why the excavation stopped then. The results were never published. They were hardly even studied. Young was very diligent and did put out the yearly summaries to the AJA, the publication of the AIA. But they were just brief, right? And in the final reports he wrote, they were based on, he did the final reports for the tumuli and not for the site, okay? Died in 74, and none of his staff went on to publish it. Went on to do anything with the Hellenistic material, okay, those upper levels. The results of those excavations lived in the records. Remember, they're all gone. Right? That material, they dug through it. And it doesn't exist anymore. But the results and the records lived in the documentation. 131 field notebooks written by 71 trench supervisors. Usually, most of the time, these were grad students from Penn. Some went on to become some of the biggest names in classical archaeology. Over 650 photographs, both tiny contact prints, just about an inch by an inch big, put in little notebooks, and larger color and black and white photographs of more impressive or important features, finds, architecture, things like that. And over 160 plans that the architects drew. Some look like they were drawn on the back of a menu with colored pencil. Some have very faint trench lines, as you can see, and indications for the trench designation. Some numbers which indicate an elevation. And then some like this with no label, just some walls. Okay. These plans all live at the Gordion archives in Penn and in a box in the excavation house at Gordion, wrapped up in a tube. Okay. So the photographs, the notebooks, and the plans. That's what was left. Okay. So when I began graduate school, this project was offered to me. Here's Hellenistic Gordion. Reconstruct it. Figure out what happened. And so this is what I had, right? This evidence to work with. The first thing to do was to create a space to work in, and the only space to do that was digital. So I digitized in AutoCAD the topographic plan to have a base to work from. Right? AutoCAD is an endless digital space, and so you can do it in there. Right? There's too much paper to be messing around with anything that wasn't digital. So I digitized the topographic plan and got a hold of the master trench plan, all the trenches that Young's team dug. Okay? That's this grid right here. And I can link up, just to orient everyone, the southeast trench there. Okay. You can see from these spots, that was one of the originals, and over here was this one, right there, and they just went out and out and out and out and out. Okay. All right. Then digitize the individual plans. Didn't matter if they had a place designation, a trench designation on it or not. There was a wall of a house or stairs or something. They had to go, it came from somewhere. So digitize it, right? I can find out where it comes from later. Keep all these files, right? And there were also plans that were in the notebooks, right? Sketch plans that the trench supervisors drew. Maybe they were to scale, maybe they weren't. It's okay, we can work out those problems later. So here is the 4 top plans drawn by different excavators over different seasons, of the different seasons this specific house was excavated. Right? Take this, and then from that, make the plan of the house. Okay? Make the plan of the house that was excavated. Okay. After that, there came the job of filling in the missing pieces, filling in the gaps, right? There's this house on this plan with these trench designations that has stuff that's been erased on it. And then there's another plan that has stuff that maybe looks like what that had been, right? So with some tricks with adjusting the contrast in Photoshop, bring this up, and then hey, now I can link these two plans together. I don't know if they go together. I don't know if the architecture is of the same period. Well, again, worry about that later. Let's just get all the architecture drawn. So that was the technique, right? And that was the reconstruction. That was the methodology to get to this. The first composite plan of all the architecture from the Hellenistic period, regardless of phase, put onto the Citadel Mound topographic plan with all the trenches. Now I can start phasing it out, going through the notebooks, piecing everything together. Okay? And you get this. 2 phases of the Hellenistic settlement. The early Hellenistic, right after Alexander, put it at 333, okay, to sometime in the middle of the 3rd century. And then the Middle Hellenistic period, from the middle of the 3rd century to 189 BC. You'll see 189, and I'll talk about 189. 189 is the date where Hellenistic Gordion ends. We know it's the date because Livy records the massacre and sack of the site by the legions of Manlius Vulso, the Roman consul, and that happens in 189. And we have the text, and as we'll see, the houses of that level are abandoned. I think Pompeii, everything's left on the floor. Right? All right, so I show you this slide to illustrate the striking difference between what Gordion had been in the Phrygian period and what it was in the Hellenistic period. Long gone are those monumental structures of Achaemenid, Phrygian first, Achaemenid later power, right? Long gone. Long gone are the fortification walls, long gone are the megara, long gone are those industrial buildings. What we have now is a village. Small houses, disconnected, some streets connecting them, maybe, right? Built on top of the wreckage of that destroyed empire and imperial capital. These are what those houses look like. This is how they were built. One of the great things about rural Turkey is that technology doesn't change very often or quickly. And so in the modern village of Yassohuyuk, the people who live there are building their houses, part of their houses, in the same way that the people of Hellenistic Gordion had built their houses and that the people of Phrygian Gordion had built their houses 400 years before that. Stone foundations, mud brick superstructures, and thatch roofs. Okay? That's what we have now. That's what we had then in the Hellenistic period. Okay? So when we talk about these houses, we're only going to look at the plans and some photographs, but imagine this kind of thing. No roof tiles, thatch roofs. All right. Sorry. We start in the early Hellenistic period, and we'll start here with this house, and we'll just walk through some of these houses to see what they look like. So this is Mabel's house. As we go through, you'll notice that these houses all have personal names. These are the names of the people that excavated them. When they dug them, the excavation team gave them names like Hellenistic House 1, Hellenistic House 2. But when you have 17 years of excavation and everybody is using the same system, then you end up with 10 Hellenistic House 1s. Right? That doesn't work. But Mabel Lang, fantastic archaeologist in her own right, Bryn Mawr, she excavated this house, and so this house gets her name, Mabel's house. what have we got? We've got actually a few, what seems to be a few structures joined together, sharing an open space. That open space has an oven, and maybe another oven here. There's a hearth here, a hearth over here, sharing an open space. This room here, paved courtyard, okay, that would have been partially roofed. Mocktel's house. We're up here, towards the center of the site. Again, a large open space, probably several structures sharing that open space. I point out here some plastered walls. Something special going on in there. There was nothing in that space, but it was plastered and small and paved, so something special is going on. But I also point out these bins here and here. Show you them there and there. These bins are architectural features that link the early Hellenistic settlement at Gordion directly to settlements along the Black Sea coast. Black Sea coast houses also have bins. And from our study of the wine trade and the evidence of the wine transport amphoras at Gordion, we know that the people living here in the early Hellenistic period are doing a pretty healthy wine trade, have a nice network with the Black Sea communities. So strong trade networks and architectural features that they share. Okay. The Eisman House. 3 rooms, a very Greek threshold in this house, leading into a center room, an open air courtyard here with a fireplace and a hearth, and a room here on the right with a bin and an off-center doorway. Okay. Here's some of the excavation of the Eisman house. Off-center doorways usually in the Greek world mean one thing, right? An andron, a dining room for the symposium. Okay? An odd number of couches fit around here, so imagine something like this. So if I bring up the fact that they have Greek dining practices, what else are we dealing with? What else might we have at Gordion that speaks to a Greek population? Right? Alexander was there. Presumably he left some people there. What do we've got? Well, from the early Hellenistic period, were recovered ostragoloi. These are they're often called knuckle bones in your text. They're the ankle bones of sheep and goats and cows. They're used for gaming pieces. They're used for fortune telling. They're like dice. Okay? The ones recovered from Gordion are inscribed. These two have this inscription on there. This one has this inscription. And this one I have a photograph of that has that inscription. For those of you who can't see it or can't read Greek, the name on these two is Hector, and the name on this one is Achilles. And the word down here, if you can't see it, is Nike. Nike, the Greek goddess of victory. Okay? So these are people, Greek, ethnic Greek or not, who know Greek culture, who know Greek stories, who know that Hector can be opposing Achilles in a game of chance, right? And who know that Nike would be somebody you would want to have on your side if you're playing a game of chance. Right? What other Greek evidence? This is a bathtub from the Greek site of Olynthus, 4th century site in northern Greece. This is a bathtub from Gordion. Same style, same behavior. I already mentioned the thresholds. We have a few very Greek doorways, okay? Very Greek thresholds. And perhaps the most Greek of everything, writing your name on your cup. Another Achilles. This guy's name is Soter, and then Demophanes. This is just a few of the Greek texts, the Greek epigraphic texts. Okay. Oh, give it away. All right. We go back very briefly to ancient history. Around the end of the 5th century, the beginning of the 4th century, the Celts in Central Europe started moving out of their homeland. Okay. Some went west, and they're the people that end up in the British Isles. Some go southwest, down into Spain. We know the people who go into Rome. They make it down into Greece and make it as far as Delphi. And some of the tribes in the early part of the 3rd century, around 279, get hired as mercenaries for the Hellenistic kings out in Anatolia who are fighting each other. These guys were warriors, the Celts. They do their duty as mercenaries, but they don't go home. They stay there and keep causing trouble for the cities and the rulers of Asia Minor, specifically the Pergamene kings, these super rich guys who lived in Asia Minor, right? They had a lot of trouble from the Celts. And when they defeated them, they set up these statues as victory monuments, both in Pergamon and in Athens. So I show you them here just to give you an idea of what Celts look like from the Greek perspective. We are told that they, actually from Roman writers, how they fight, which was naked and screaming, and they're all pale, which makes it terrifying when they get cut, because the bright blood on their pale bodies was even more terrifying. They have mustaches, which was weird. They had weird crunchy hair. And they wore these weird necklaces called torques. Okay? Called torques. All right. So the Celts pillaged and caused trouble up and down Asia Minor for a while. And finally, the Roman Senate gets involved and basically gives them Phrygia. Like, you people need a place to go. So go to Phrygia, because nobody wanted it. Right? None of the Hellenistic kings after Alexander cared about Phrygia. Nobody, it was not under the control of the Seleucids. Nobody wanted it. It was just sort of sitting there. And so that's where the Celts go. Okay? This is the land that will become later Galatia. Okay? What's right in the middle of Phrygia? Gordion. So the Celts set up shop at Gordion, and we begin a new phase of the occupation there, the middle Hellenistic period, starting sometime around to, let's say, middle of the 3rd century to 70, 60, 40, somewhere in there. Okay? As you can see, the character of the site doesn't change. We still have disassociated houses, unconnected private homes. Okay? Some houses are abandoned, some are sort of refurbished and remodeled, and there are other new constructions that are built. Okay? But all in the same very general flavor as we had before. Okay? Let's look at a few of those. Here's Ken's house. Okay? Once again, these are the houses that last until 189. So when Young and his team are excavating these upper levels on the Citadel Mound, these are the houses they find. Okay? 189, the Romans come, the inhabitants flee, nobody ever comes back. Okay? Nobody comes back, at least to this part of the mound. We have Roman occupation later in another spot, but not this spot. So everything's still there. So we're at Ken's house. Lots of pottery on the floors were found. Okay? Nice, solid destruction level. Okay? Broken pottery, storage jars, dining cups, plates, and this interesting jar, which looks like a generic amphora, but this little spout right here and the fact that it's scored on the inside, one thing. It's a beehive. Right? It's a beehive. That was in there. What else do we have? We have Greenie's neighborhood. Greenie is the familiar name for one of the brilliant Near Eastern archaeologists, Crawford Greenwald Jr., one of my professors as an undergrad at Berkeley, and just the nicest guy you will have ever met. Died a couple years ago, but he excavated this area. Two houses, house one, house two, an alley between them, and then this open courtyard out here, which had a lot of cultic equipment. First is this incense burner that was inscribed in Greek with a Phrygian name. Right? The letters are Greek, the name is Phrygian. There's this incense burner, which has a kind of door motif and some roof iconography, and maybe a tree right here. To my knowledge, no one has studied this, so if anybody's interested in anything. An enthroned marble Cybele. Cybele is a native Anatolian goddess, often kind of conflated with a mother goddess. Okay. And what I have here labeled Persephone, clearly a Greek marble figurine. Could be Persephone, could be, actually, it's probably better to be Demeter. She's carrying a torch. Okay, so a nice blend, even in this one yard, of different cultures represented by the gods they're worshiping. Cybele and a Greek female god. Okay. One of the most impressive, not in terms of its architecture, because this was it, but in terms of the finds found in it, was Roger's house. Here's a graphic of how it was drawn in the excavation book. A kind of stone courtyard out here, paved. There were loom weights for weaving out in the courtyard, and a grindstone for grinding grain. Nice place, do your work outside. Inside the house, however, again, only two walls were preserved, all burned. Wood, burned wood, thatch, ash, everything. Underneath that, which was the roof that fell, wine amphoras, alabastron, which might have been for makeup or oil, dining ware, so cups and plates, an alabaster jar with the inscription Kina, which could have been reference to a Phrygian name, or it perhaps held a compound called cinnabar, which was the ancient kind of rouge, unfortunately incredibly poisonous, and figurines that you see here. Okay. Here are those figurines. A couple attachments to pottery, two enthroned Cybeles. These are both, this one's about a half a meter tall. Two enthroned Cybeles. This is called a bust flower themiaterion. What that all means is that it was an incense burner and you stuck it in the back of this guy's head. Right? But he, if you notice his ears, right, kind of donkey ears, ass's ears. Who else had ass's ears? Midas. Right? So maybe this was some joke that somebody's playing. Right? And then this female figurine here. can't really see it in that picture, but I'll go closer. Right. Standard Greek female dress. Greek hairstyle. She's missing her arms. That's fine. But there are these nubs in the back. Who has nubs? What might those be? Right? Wings. Right? She's Nike. She's Nike. Except there's one more detail around her neck. A torque. Right? A torque. So in this house, we have people worshiping Greek gods, but blending it with Celtic iconography. Mixing the cultures up, right? We take all kinds here. Right? Just like we had Greek personal names, we have Celtic personal names. They take up the behavior of Greeks and use the Greek alphabet. These are not Greek names. Felix, Kentix. This one I have a problem with pronouncing, so I'm not going to try. Also found in the Hellenistic levels was this marble object. We just call it a quadruped. We're not sure what exactly it is. Right? It's got 4 feet. It's got pretty serious claws. It's got very serious teeth. Very defined, articulated ribs. Right? And I'll leave it to you to decide on the craftsmanship. But it reminded the excavators of another object. The Tarasque, from the Latin Celtic homeland, New France. Right? This thing with same kind of teeth, same articulated ribs, except this one is eating people. Right? This is a human arm in its mouth, and it's holding human heads. There is some evidence at Gordion in the lower town in the Hellenistic period of structured Celtic burials. And by structured, I mean the bodies aren't just laid out. I mean the human bodies are mixed with other humans or animals. Or there's a pit full of just human leg bones. Right? So there is some definite evidence of Celts doing the things that we know that they were doing in their homeland at Gordion. All right. And our final house that we'll look at, Rodney's house. Of course, this was a house that Young excavated. And again, like Rogers, one of the most important. It's a sprawling complex. Front courtyard, passageway here. Perhaps this was the door or the front door. This is the edge of the mound, as you can see. So the preservation of these walls here was not very good. Paved courtyard into either this open courtyard here, or into this storeroom, which had another room in the back. Okay? And then steps, if you take a right, steps leading up through this doorway into 2 rooms and another courtyard back here. This is the courtyard as it was excavated. Some broken pottery out there. Here are those steps. In this short piece of paving that was against this wall was this marble column base. Now, there's no reason why you put a column base that close to a wall. There's no practical architectural reason for it, so there must be something else going on. A close look at the top of this column base shows that, actually both sides show that they were worn down in a circular pattern, as if somebody had ground some grain on it over and over and over again. Okay? As we'll see, having grinding installations right over pavement is pretty common. Okay? So we have that there. Okay? Let's move to the backyard, back courtyard. Another one. placed between these two stones. Okay, another marble column base. Incidentally, these probably came from when Gordion was under Achaemenid control. Okay. That one's there. Right next to it is a lower grinding stone. Right? You have the one in your hand, and then you have the one that you grind on. Okay. All right. Just to prove and show you some comparanda, this is a plan of a house from Olynthus, again, that Greek site in northern Greece. Inside the house, multiple stations for grinding grain. Okay. This place, Rodney's house, had a lot. There's one in the front, one in the back. There looks like in this storeroom, in this pantry, more tools for grinding grain, but also these enormous pithoi, these enormous storage jars for holding it, for holding all the grain that was being prepared there. That's way too much grain for one household. It's too much. Something else is happening. Right? One of those pithoi around the rim was inscribed with this name, the possessive of the Greek name Menecrates, as in this pithos belongs to Menecrates. Right? Also on that pithos were volume marks, volume indications that were the same in the same system that was used at Pergamon. The same system that was used at Pergamon. So maybe Menecrates came from Pergamon, right? Or maybe he's getting his grain from there. In that room behind, this is the photograph from when it was being excavated, a mass of pottery. Just all dumped in a pile, all found in a pile. Hundreds of vessels, dining plates. And in that entire house, there's maybe like one cup. It's all plates. And these plates, Greek. They're Greek. Also in that storeroom, another figurine collection. Okay. Seated Kybalies. This one's riding a lion. She's seated, she's got a lion in her lap. Greek females standing, dressed, wrapped up in Greek female heads. These two Kybali figurines also come from Pergamon. The material and the iconography is from Kybali sanctuaries there. Okay. Now we get to the end of our story. Right? I said that Gordion was sacked by the Roman legions in 189. The inhabitants at Gordion had plenty of time to leave. Right? There were no bodies found in the houses. Everybody left and they ran to the hills, and there they met their end, unfortunately. They were slaughtered there. But sadly, but also very emotionally, there was hope that they would come back. In Rodney's house, they blocked up the doors to that storeroom, right? To the place where they had their most prized possessions, the figurines. Okay. Didn't work out, but so when we take a brief step back then and look at what happens in the Hellenistic period, especially in that later, the Middle Hellenistic period, we can talk about how they lived, right? Because everything was left on the floors. So we know about domestic economy. They're grinding grain, they're weaving. You have the loom weights. The guy in Ken's house was keeping bees and selling his honey. There's ceramic production. In this building that we didn't get a chance to look at, the pottery establishment, is a series of kilns that had molds for those ceramic incense burners, and figurines. And there's surplus storage. Ken's house had way too many storage amphoras for just the guy, one family, as we saw at Rodney's. Way too much storage there. We can also talk about their religious behavior and their cult areas. Roger's house and the figurine deposit there, and Rodney's house and the figurine deposit there. And the mix of religious behavior and pantheons, right? Or the mix of everything, right? Nike again with her torque, Greek, either Demeter or Persephone, in a very Greek style. When we look closer, and this is the last slide, and I'll end with this, and we combine the figurine deposits and the masses of pottery that were recovered from Rodney's house and Roger's house. And we think about what happened with Kybele. We go back to Kybele, who had started out as this Anatolian mother goddess. She gets imported by the powers in the Mediterranean. Rome brings her, or the Romans bring her to Rome in the form of a big stone. The Greeks adopt her, and they bring her to Athens. They bring the cult of Kybele to Athens, and they change it a little bit. And we have records in Athens and in Piraeus, the harbor, of Greek dining clubs that meet to eat and practice whatever Kybele worship they do. We don't have any text evidence from Gordion to back this up, but it seems that when the Greeks go to Gordion, following Alexander, and in the wake of Greek culture that they bring with them, it's language, it's architecture, it's art, it's religion, they bring Kybele back, but now a Greekized Kybele, an Athenian Kybele, and they practice that same worship here, right? Dining clubs. In these places, in these houses that have way too much plates and way too much storage and Kybele iconography. And so I look at Rodney's house and Roger's house as these moments of the essence of the Hellenistic period, right? Where everything is flowing together. And the people who are living here, Phrygians, Celts, Greeks, probably Lydians who never left, right? All picking and choosing the parts of the Hellenistic world that they want to participate in. And nobody, remember, they're politically unaffiliated. Right? Nobody is bothering them. Right? Unfortunately, the end came because the Romans were still worried about the Celts causing trouble, which is why Vulso was sent out there to just end it, which he did. Right? The Celts held on. Right? We know that within 100 years of this, at another site, a Celt, now we can probably call them Galatians, a Galatian is the high priest of Kybele. Right? So they have moved up in the aristocracy. But we see at Gordion the real mixing of the cultures. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Marty, for that interesting lecture. I think that one of the great lessons in this that we have to communicate is that how much can be done with archival material from these old excavations, and there are just stories about and ask modern questions about like about how cultures are coming together at a particular place. And I thought one of the interesting things, just looking at your plan, this doesn't look like a big Hellenistic cynicism grid plan city or
Right.
anything like this. How big do you think the Hellen was it smaller than the Iron Age settlements?
Yes,
or-
yes.
Yeah.
It was, I think, absolutely smaller. Now, it's hard to see from the images I'm showing because I need to make them bigger, but only half the mound, the Citadel mound, is excavated. Only half of it. So, presumably, there's Hellenistic houses elsewhere. But what we have speaks of a place that is nothing like a Hellenistic city. Planned out, gridded, and there are some immediate things that we can say, and one could argue that there's no way this is Greek city. One of which is there's no temple,
Yeah.
right? You have Greeks living in a place and there's no temple. There's no agora. There's no public architecture at all. Right? There's one building that may have some public function, but it doesn't look monumental. Right? Public architecture is usually monumental. All this stuff is small. Right?
I saw there was a shrine.
Yeah, that's the building I'm
What's
talking about.
What's that? Yeah.
So the shrine and then there's a room next door called the basement. Both of those rooms do not have any domestic pottery in it. There's no cookware, there's no diningware, there's no nothing. But what there was none of that material. But what there was were marble figurine fragments and a small marble statue base inscribed with the name Echebios, which is not attested anywhere, but could be the name of some local god. But again, it was written in Greek. And the style of the marble fragments are also Greek. And so we have no domestic material, nothing like this, but cultic material. So that gives me an idea that if there is any kind of public building, it's that one. There's no temple, and no agora, and no council house, no theater, at least in the stuff we have.
Why don't we open the floor?
Yeah.
And maybe I'll take a question from a student first. Yes, sir.
I'm actually not a student. So
Oh, right. Yeah.
I know I'm
Do
young.
we have a student?
You're always a student.
Oh, yeah. I'll go to the front. You have a question.
Yes, in your dining call, I'm seeing pottery. What about utensils? Was there metal? Didn't talk about any metal.
No. The dining in this period would have been all by hand, shared plates. It's actually really amazing. If you eat out of these plates with maybe some kind of a food like a porridge or something and some bread, it's very satisfying and very easy to eat out of because the bowls curve up and you can really scoop around. And nobody's going to be eating with utensils for a while, I think. But yeah, this was exactly how Greeks are eating. Right?
What about metal? I mean, metal.
We do have metal in various configurations. We have a lot of coins, so there's one section of metal. Some and we have, I think, also 7 coin hoards, some of which were gold. These were probably the gold coins that Alexander was paying his soldiers with, and so some of them stayed for here. We have furniture attachments like hinges and things like that. There's a lock and a key, horse trappings, and not from the Hellenistic period, but from the Roman period, chainmail. So we do get a lot of that. And some of it, like the furniture attachment, still has the wood. No, and it wasn't so sort of um, up in the air as that. These were all essentially professional archaeologists, but it is true that there was, with 71 different excavators, 71 different styles, and
But they
71
destroyed
different
everything on the way.
attention to detail.
But they destroyed everything on the way?
No, destroy, not, they excavated it and then removed it.
So, my actual question though was with the assimilation. Do you think it was do you think that the Celts came in, assimilated in, or do you think that they stayed separate, or?
It's a great question. It's a great question. Depending on who you talk to, you'll get a different answer. I think that there was a significant level of assimilation. However, these people, as I said, were mercenaries and warriors. And having them showing up at this backwater, nothing place, I feel, and there's some evidence for this, that they become the aristocracy. Remember the tumuli, where the Phrygian royalty, where the Phrygian royals were buried? At the end of the Phrygian period, so let's say sometime in the 7th century, tumulus burials stopped. Nobody's doing that anymore. And nobody does it in the Lydian period, nobody does it in the Hellenistic period. But when they start doing it again, it's in the Hellenistic period. And it's a Celt who's buried. So it makes complete sense that they look back to a time when they assume that the royals are buried in it. Most of those tumuli were looted in antiquity. So they know that the dead are buried in there, and the dead who were buried in there are high status. So I think it makes total sense that these guys who thought that they were high status and had the might to do it, started burying themselves. And there is some evidence, and I'll just say that it exists, I don't necessarily agree with it, that in a certain sector of the site that Young did not excavate, but has been recently excavated, that where the architecture is a little more substantial, that might have been a Celtic kind of zone. But I don't see in the stuff that Young excavated any kind of ethnic markers. It's more of a symbol. There's nothing that says this was where the Greeks were. That's a great question. It's a great question.
Yeah, does assimilation assume that you have a sort of fixed culture to assimilate?
Yeah, no,
into?
exactly right.
But
Right,
so,
totally.
so it doesn't quite here. You have people who are
Right.
traveling, you have breaks in occupation.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah, and everybody's just kind of
what
finding
is
their
the
way.
standard of assimilation? It looks
Yeah.
much more like this crossroads.
Yeah, exactly.
That you would expect.
Exactly, yeah.
But, yeah, Melissa.
I want to ask about the Gordion knot.
Yeah.
So going back in time, so you mentioned that you think they've identified the room
Yes.
where the knot is stored. Why do you think it's that one?
Because
What's there?
it's the only building at that period of the time of the site. Remember, this is the end of the Achaemenid period, so after the earthquake, you're not building anything, you've got a bronze foundry and some ironworks and an alabaster workshop, and just everything's falling apart. But there's one building, there's actually two rooms in that longer building that were new constructions, and it has a mosaic floor. And there's a pattern in the floor that suggests that there was a kind of throne or something that was special, because it's a kind of geometric pattern for most of the mosaic, and then there's a space that's empty. And so, if there's a place where the knot is going to be, and the knot was the a piece of fennel stalk that's holding a wagon together. It's holding the yoke pin of a wagon together. And if there's any place that wagon's gonna be, it's out here. There's nowhere else, at least in what we excavated, that would have been fancy or appropriate. And yeah, so it's total speculation, but yeah, maybe. Right? This was, I mean, if you guys don't know the story, this is the wagon that Gordius had been traveling on when an eagle landed on the knot, on the yoke. And he goes to a small village, and he knows that they're fortune tellers and oracle readers, and he asks them what this means, and this woman tells him, wow, it's the eagle of Zeus, like you're blessed. And he marries her, and then they go to Gordion. So he like rolls into the city, and then comes the prophecy later of the rule of Asia. But it's great question too. It's really like fun part of the story.
What about the gold?
The gold.
Because, Gordion's famous for gold.
Right. So this is another great story, and it's also another great story about what comes from doing the science part of archaeology. So in all the excavations and the tumuli that we've excavated, even the Midas mound tumulus which was not Midas, it cannot be Midas. It was, Midas probably built it for his successor. And the timing doesn't work out for Midas. But when Young excavated in 53, it's just a room full of bronze. Cauldrons and bowls, and the body's lying there, and there's leather horse straps, and it's amazing. And they thought it was so rich, it was Midas. But there's no gold. There's no gold. But somebody did analysis of the shroud that the body was buried in, that overlaid the shroud. And I don't remember the name of the material that the shroud was covered in, but it was kind of like a gold paint. And it's likely, the assumption now is because we don't have gold from anywhere. There's no treasure, there's no nothing. But since Midas had this reputation of dressing in gold and having all this gold, it maybe comes from the fact that the Phrygians wore these outfits that were painted to look like gold, or they shone in some way that people just, like the rumor spread that he wears gold, because this shroud had that material in it, or painted on it. Yeah, I wish I had it more in my head what exactly this stuff was.
Was it gold, or it just looked?
No, it's not gold. It's a different material. It was not gold.
Sand.
What?
Sand.
Yeah. No, it's a word. It is a mineral compound that I've never heard of except in this context. Yeah. There was some maybe in the front row. She from the beginning. Yeah.
I had a question just about something that I thought I maybe heard you say in your story at the very beginning about there weren't Greek surgeons in Templeton. Is that what you said?
No. We might assume, looking at other Hellenistic cities in the east, that because Alexander lays them out and establishes, 7 different Alexandrias, and the new cities that come up in the centuries that follow under the kings that came after him, these are all, you can almost, it's like a recipe. We're going to have a theater, we're going to have a temple, we're going to have a council house, we're going to have, and it's all going to be gridded, because that's how we build our cities now, and we can just like cookie cutter them everywhere.
Well, not everywhere. Depends on how far east you go. I mean,
Sure.
Solution on the Tigris, you know, the temple. Every, temple.
Sure.
So
Like,
you're
we don't have to
saying
go
that this is more
everywhere.
like Turkey, Hellenistic Turkey, Hellenistic Levant.
Right. we can the fact that those cities don't have some of those elements is the same kind of thing, right? They are picking and choosing what they want, right? Picking and choosing what they want. So
So you think it's more kind of Eastern, or at least local looking in that sense that it doesn't
local's the
have
right word.
the Hellenistic.
I think local's the right word,
Okay.
right? We are not in the architectural like currents of the big cities. Probably because Seleucus and Antiochus didn't care about this place. So it's out of sight, out of mind. So they don't get the attention, they don't get the money, they don't get anything. It's maybe one theory. But no, you're absolutely right.
There's still probably Greeks here.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's Greeks here, there's the Celts, there's the Phrygians. Right? They're all. Yeah.
And then my follow-up question to that is, do the tumuli that the Celts built here owe anything to Macedonian tumuli? In terms of construction, like
No, they look like the Phrygian ones.
okay, so they don't engage with that tradition?
No.
Macedonian.
No. Not building those big tomb chambers, no.
Okay.
They do. So the Phrygians built the burial chambers in wood, like these some wood rooms. When the Celts do it, they do it in stone, but it's the same kind of shape. Right? It doesn't recall any of that barrel vaulting from Macedon. That's great. Yeah.
I'm curious about the people in dining hall, because you come from the Greek occupation period, the offset rim with the Cosmopolitan.
Right. Yeah. From the
All men, and I'm just curious, is the people in dining hall, I assume is all men?
is also men. Yeah. Well, I don't know about here, but from the inscription and textual evidence that we have from Attica, those are males, and we would expect that the women aren't going outside. That's a good question. Yeah, we don't know what's happening here. Who knows? I don't know what the Celtic gender relations are, right? If it's them that's doing it or not. But presumably, in that early Hellenistic andron, those are men, I would guess. Yeah.
What was Gordion not made, and where did it come from? What was its origin?
It was what from the account. It sounds like it was a kind of tree root that was just wrapped around the pin that held the wagon to the cart. Yeah. But it was touched by Zeus, and it had this power. Yeah. Oh, great. Yeah.
What was the climate like in those centuries when it was occupied?
So I think pretty much what it was like now. Summers are really hot and windy, and the winters are wet and kind of miserable.
I didn't see any trees, and that's a prayer.
That's a great point, and that is something that is really fascinating. In antiquity, trees everywhere. But for the construction projects, all those major Phrygian buildings, lots of wood. And they deforested that entire plain, which caused it to fill up with the erosion. So the actual ancient ground level in the plain is about 5 to 8 meters lower than what it is right now. And all the rest of that is alluvial flow and erosion. What it also did, and this is amazing, it caused the river to move from one side of the mound to the other. So the mound it's on the west side now. It used to be on the east side. That's where it was. It moved around and it sort of meandered, but then because of all the erosion coming through from the ridges, pushed it all to the west.
Possibly is how fast it was
Yeah.
the river.
Yeah. There's more science about archaeology. Christian.
Do you think with the evidence that came in Rodney's house, like the grain and the pins with the flat pottery, like those types of like pieces show proof maybe that there was an early kind of like free market economy maybe?
Sure, absolutely. I think that this is a place that has coinage, but maybe isn't using coinage for their own internal affairs, right? It's payment in kind, because we don't have what we have in like shops and things. We don't have shops. Right? We just have people doing business out of their, what seem to be their homes.
Like a private business type thing.
Yeah. On the other hand, though, at a place like Ken's house and or Roger's house and Rodney's house, with the storage, especially in Rodney's with those big pithoi, the big storage, that maybe seems to be for the people who are going there and eating. Maybe for the whatever is happening with, it's a bunch of grain and many plates. So maybe they're connected, or maybe he's selling some, right?
What about the hoard evidence? I mean, everybody's got gold coins of Alexander, but is this showing the sort of trade with the Black Sea or trade with Greece? That kind of story we're seeing from the other evidence?
The Black Sea trade ends with the Celts.
Oh, right.
The Black Sea trade ends with the Celts. They seem to have absolutely disrupted that. And so in the middle period, when people are building new houses, no, there are no more bins, and the amphora, the wine amphora trade stops. We don't get any more Black Sea stuff. But what we do get instead is that connection with Pergamum, connection with the East. So the coins are, I am hesitant to speak too much on, because it's been years since I looked at it. But they are what you would, there's nothing strange about any of them. Right? They're ones that, they're from mints that are sort of Asia Minor cities, major Asia Minor cities, but nothing that is sort of out of the ordinary. That's the best answer I can give at this point.
Do we have any further questions?
Yeah, it might be